Have you ever wondered why the city of Jerusalem holds such a powerful place in the hearts of so many? Why does this city, small in size but enormous in influence, captivate the attention of billions across different faiths? Is it just because of its long and complex history, or is there something deeper? Jerusalem is often referred to as the epicenter of the world in the Christian faith, where the heavenly kingdom meets the earthly realm. It is a city revered not only for its physical history but for its spiritual significance as the place where God's divine plan has been and will continue to be fulfilled. The streets, walls, and hills of Jerusalem hold the footprints of kings, prophets, and the Messiah himself. It is the place where Jesus was brought as a child to be presented at the temple, Luke 2:22, and where he later attended religious festivals, Luke 2:41. From the sacrificial altars of Solomon's temple to the footsteps of Jesus' final days, this city is laden with divine purpose. In this video, we'll explore Jerusalem's story from its earliest days through its biblical significance and onto its modern-day role as a city of conflict, faith, and prophecy. As we delve into its historical, spiritual, and prophetic roles, you'll understand why Jerusalem is more than just a city. It's a holy battleground, the meeting point of heaven and earth, and the key to understanding God's redemptive plan for the world. Before we explore Jerusalem's history, let's start with its name. Jerusalem is derived from the Hebrew word Yerushalayim, a name that means city of peace or foundation of peace. At first glance, this seems ironic. How can a city that has witnessed so much warfare, bloodshed, and conflict be called the city of peace? In a sense, Jerusalem's name is a prophecy in itself. Throughout history, Jerusalem has been a city caught in the crossfire of empires and nations, but the Bible tells us that its ultimate destiny is one of peace, the kind of divine peace that only God can bring. The book of Isaiah foretells of a time when Jerusalem will be the center of global peace and spiritual renewal. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Isaiah 2:4. In the New Testament, Jerusalem becomes the place where Jesus offers the world the path to eternal peace through his death and resurrection. And according to biblical prophecy, Jerusalem will be the center of God's eternal kingdom when the new Jerusalem descends from heaven. Revelation 21 verse 2. So, while its history may seem anything but peaceful, Jerusalem is the city where God's ultimate peace will be established. To understand Jerusalem's significance, we need to go back, way back, to its ancient origins. Long before it became the center of the Jewish faith and a pivotal city in Christianity, Jerusalem was a Canaanite city known as Jebus. It was first inhabited around 3000 BC, and by 2000 BC it was recognized as an established city, known in ancient Egyptian texts as Urus-Salim, a term that might mean foundation of Shalem, referring to a Canaanite god of twilight or dusk. But the first significant biblical mention of Jerusalem comes during the time of Abraham. In Genesis 14:18, we meet Melchizedek, the king of Salem, another early name for Jerusalem, who is also a priest of God Most High. Melchizedek brings out bread and wine to bless Abraham after a victorious battle. This encounter between Abraham and Melchizedek is shrouded in mystery and has sparked much theological debate. Melchizedek's dual role as both a king and a priest prefigures Jesus, who would later be called a priest in the order of Melchizedek, Hebrews 7:17. This brief yet profound meeting between Abraham and Melchizedek plants Jerusalem in the heart of Jewish consciousness even before it becomes a Jewish city. From this point, Jerusalem is not just another Canaanite city, it is marked by God for a greater destiny. The turning point in Jerusalem's story comes when King David conquers the city in around 1000 BC. The Bible tells us that David captured Jerusalem from the Jebusites after they taunted him, saying the city was too fortified to be taken. 2 Samuel 5:6-7. But with God's guidance, David triumphs and establishes Jerusalem as the capital of his newly united kingdom of Israel. But why did David choose Jerusalem? Strategically, it was a brilliant move. It was located on the border between the northern and southern tribes, making it a neutral, unifying capital. But David didn't just see it as a political decision. Jerusalem was to be more than just the capital of a nation. It was to be the spiritual heart of Israel. David brought the Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred object in Israel, to Jerusalem, symbolizing that God's presence was now dwelling in the city. 2 Samuel 6:12-15. From this moment forward, Jerusalem wasn't just a political capital, it became the center of Jewish worship and the place where God would meet his people. David's son Solomon would go even further. He built the first temple in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, the site where Abraham had been willing to sacrifice his son Isaac, 1 Kings 6. The Temple of Solomon became the focal point of Jewish worship, the place where sacrifices were made to atone for sins, and where the Ark of the Covenant was housed in the Holy of Holies. For the next few centuries, Jerusalem stood as the unrivaled spiritual capital of the Jewish people, a beacon of God's covenant with Israel. But this golden age wouldn't last forever. After centuries of growth and prosperity, Jerusalem faced its darkest moment. In 586 BC, the powerful Babylonian Empire, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, invaded Jerusalem after a lengthy siege. They destroyed the first temple, looted the city's treasures, and took the majority of the Jewish people into captivity in Babylon. 2 Kings 25:9. This was not just a military defeat, it was a spiritual catastrophe for the Jewish people. Their sacred temple, the dwelling place of God, had been reduced to ruins. The Babylonian exile lasted 70 years, during which the people of Israel were separated from their homeland, their temple, and their God. The prophet Jeremiah had warned of this destruction, calling the people of Israel to repentance, but his words went unheeded. Now, with Jerusalem lying in ashes, the exiled Jews faced an uncertain future. Yet even in the midst of despair, there was a glimmer of hope. The prophet spoke of a future restoration when the people would return to Jerusalem and rebuild. The prophet Ezekiel saw visions of a new temple, grander than the first, where God's presence would return to his people, Ezekiel 40-48. And the prophet Isaiah proclaimed that the Messiah would come to Jerusalem to establish God's eternal kingdom, Isaiah 9:6-7. 70 years after the exile began, Cyrus the Great, the king of Persia, conquered Babylon and allowed the Jewish people to return to their homeland, Ezra 1:1-4. The return to Jerusalem was a momentous event. It marked the fulfillment of prophecy and the beginning of a new chapter in Jerusalem's story. The returning exiles, led by Zerubbabel, immediately set about rebuilding the temple. This second temple was completed in 516 BC, but it lacked the grandeur of Solomon's temple. Still, it became the center of Jewish worship once again. The people had returned to Jerusalem, but the city was no longer as independent or powerful as it once was. Under Persian and later Greek rule, Jerusalem became a spiritual center, but remained under foreign control. Yet even in this period of relative peace, Jerusalem was not forgotten in prophecy. The prophets continued to speak of a coming Messiah who would enter the city and bring about a new era of peace and justice. This Messiah would not only restore Jerusalem, but also fulfill God's promises to Israel and the world. For Christians, Jerusalem takes on even greater significance because it is the city where the Messiah, Jesus Christ, carried out his ministry, death, and resurrection. The New Testament places Jerusalem at the center of the gospel message as the city where God's salvation plan was fulfilled. Jesus was brought to Jerusalem as a child to be presented at the temple, Luke 2:22, and he often visited the city throughout his ministry. But his most significant entry into Jerusalem was on Palm Sunday, when he rode into the city on a donkey, fulfilling the prophecy of Zechariah 9:9. Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly, and riding on a donkey. Jesus' crucifixion took place just outside the city walls of Jerusalem, and his resurrection from the dead happened within the city. This moment, the resurrection, was the fulfillment of God's ultimate promise to redeem humanity through Jesus Christ. For Christians, Jerusalem is the place where sin and death were defeated and where eternal life was made possible. But Jesus' mission was not just to bring redemption, it was to prepare the world for his return. According to biblical prophecy, Jesus will return to Jerusalem in the end times, where he will establish his eternal kingdom. This makes Jerusalem not just a city of the past, but a city of the future. Just as Jesus had predicted, Jerusalem would once again face destruction. In 70 AD, after a Jewish revolt, the Romans under Titus besieged the city and destroyed the Second Temple. The destruction was devastating for the Jewish people. They lost not only their temple, but also their homeland. Many were scattered across the Roman Empire, marking the beginning of the Jewish diaspora. The destruction of the temple was also significant for Christians, as it was seen as the fulfillment of Jesus' prophecy in Matthew 24 verse 2, where he foretold that not one stone would be left upon another. With the temple gone, Jerusalem's spiritual significance shifted in a new direction. Today, Jerusalem is still a city of profound significance, but also one of intense political conflict. Israel claims the city as its undivided capital, while the Palestinians seek East Jerusalem as the capital of a future state. Despite these political tensions, Jerusalem remains the spiritual heart of the world for Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. The city is home to the Western Wall, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and the Dome of the Rock, sacred sites for each of the three Abrahamic faiths. But beyond the religious significance, Jerusalem remains central to biblical prophecy. The Bible tells us that Jerusalem will continue to be the focal point of world events, especially as we approach the end times. The story of Jerusalem is far from over. According to biblical prophecy, the city will play a key role in the end times. The book of Revelation describes the coming of a new Jerusalem, where God will dwell with his people forever. This new Jerusalem is a city of peace, where there will be no more death, sorrow, or pain. Revelation 21 verse 2 through 4. Zechariah 12, 2-3 also speaks of a time when Jerusalem will become a burdensome stone for all nations, and those who try to move it will injure themselves. This prophecy hints at the future conflicts over the city, but it also assures us that God's plan for Jerusalem will ultimately prevail. Jerusalem will be the center of God's eternal kingdom, where heaven and earth will finally meet in perfect peace. So, why is Jerusalem the epicenter of biblical prophecy? Why does it hold such a central place in the hearts of Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike? The answer is clear. Jerusalem is where God's story unfolds. It's the city where heaven and earth meet, where the promises of God were fulfilled through Jesus. and where future prophecies about God's eternal kingdom will come to pass. Its spiritual significance reaches far beyond its borders, touching the very heart of the Christian faith. As we watch events unfold in Jerusalem, we can be sure that this city, the city of peace, will continue to play a central role in God's redemptive plan. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Jerusalem's incredible history. If this exploration has opened your eyes to new insights, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. For more ways to support deep Bible stories, check the description below.